At the edge of the world, a volcano erupts in the dead of night. Lava, glowing like liquid gold, tears through the jungle and devours the ground in its path. Smoke coils upward, black and furious, and the earth shakes beneath barefoot villagers who whisper prayers to a goddess older than memory. Thousands of miles away, in a land where the sun barely rises, a hunter breaks through a crust of ice to fish beneath the frozen sea. The wind is a blade. The silence is complete, and below the ice something stirs, ancient, watchful, divine. These two worlds, one aflame, one frozen, could not be more different, yet both are shaped by extremes, ruled by unforgiving forces and explained through the voices of gods. Before science and satellites, before geology and climate models, people understood the earth through story. And when the earth roared, burned, or froze, they saw not just natural events, but the moods of divine beings. Myths were not fiction. They were explanations, sacred logic wrapped in narrative. The gods of fire and ice were not distant creators lounging in the heavens. They were immediate, elemental, and deeply present. They lived in the mountains, under the waves, in the thunder and snow. They demanded respect, and when ignored or angered, they answered with fury. Among the Inuit of the Arctic, the sea was life and death, and at its heart dwelled Sedna, the goddess of the deep. Her story is as haunting as the landscape she rules. A girl betrayed, cast into the sea by her own father, her fingers severed as she clung to the boat. Each finger became a sea creature, the seal, the walrus, the whale. Sedna sank to the ocean floor and became a powerful spirit. She holds the fate of hunters in her cold grasp. If she is angered, the seas grow silent. If she is pleased, the waters teem with life. In a world where a missed hunt could mean starvation, the people did not just fish. They prayed, they sang, they sent shamans to comb the depths of the spirit world to soothe her wrath. Contrast that with Pele, the Hawaiian goddess of volcanoes, fire, and creation. She is not cold or silent. She is fierce, loud, and alive. She arrived in the Hawaiian Islands on a canoe, fleeing jealous rivals. With her flaming hair and volatile temper, she forged islands from the sea, carving craters with her footsteps and spitting fire through the mouths of mountains. Her presence is still felt today on the Big Island, where Kilauea continues to erupt, a living symbol of her restless spirit. Locals leave offerings at her crater. Some swear they've seen her walking the roads in the form of an old woman, testing travelers' kindness. She is beloved, feared, and revered, the very embodiment of the land's destructive beauty. These two deities, Sedna of the ice and Pele of the fire, speak to a profound human need, to understand the uncontrollable. They emerge from vastly different environments, but they serve similar roles. They give meaning to the chaos of nature. They offer a way to speak to forces that cannot be tamed. They are, in a sense, humanity's oldest science, stories born not from fantasy but from close observation, survival, and awe. Their myths tell us how people once saw their place in the world, not as conquerors of nature but as participants in a sacred dance with it. To live near volcanoes or under the eternal frost was to live with constant danger, but it was also to live with wonder. The earth breathed, spoke, punished, and blessed, and those who listened closely heard the voices of gods. This story is about those voices. It's about the deities who shaped ice and fire, and the people who honored them with stories that have outlasted empires. As we journey through these myths of rage, betrayal, creation, and survival, we step into a world where earth and spirit are one, where every eruption is a warning, every freeze a sign, and every god a mirror of the land they rule. In the world of the Inuit, the sea is not just water, it is a vast, breathing entity, dangerous, mysterious, and alive. Beneath its frozen surface lies a darkness that holds both life and death. And at the heart of that darkness is Sedna, the queen of the deep. Her name is spoken with reverence, fear, and love. She is not a gentle goddess, nor is she easily appeased, but she is necessary. She is the giver of all marine life, and the one who can take it all away with the flick of her icy fingers. The legend of Sedna begins with betrayal. As the story goes, she was once a young woman living on the edge of the Arctic, strong-willed and beautiful, but troubled. In some versions, she refuses all suitors, angering her father. In others, she is tricked by a shape-shifting spirit who promises wealth and happiness, but turns out to be a monstrous bird creature. Her father, horrified by what she has become entangled with, attempts to rescue her by canoe. But when the spirit god pursues them, whipping the ocean into a frenzy, he panics. He throws Sedna overboard to save himself. She clings to the side of the boat, her fingers grasping desperately at the edge. And in a moment that seals her fate and his guilt, he chops off her fingers with an axe. As she sinks beneath the waves, her severed fingers transform into the animals that would sustain the Inuit people for generations. The seals, the walruses, the whales. She does not die, but descends into Adlavun, the watery underworld, where she becomes a powerful spirit, ruling over the sea and all its creatures. From that moment on, the Inuit could only hunt and eat with her permission. If Sedna was displeased by broken taboos, pollution, cruelty, or neglect, she would withhold her creatures. The waters would become barren, the people would starve. To restore balance, shamans would embark on spiritual journeys to Sedna's realm, diving deep into trance to reach her. There they would find her tangled hair and twisted emotions, full of rage and sorrow. The shaman's role was not to fight her, but to comb her hair, to soothe her, to coax her back into harmony with the human world. This intimate act, combing the hair of a goddess, was a sacred ritual of reconciliation. It symbolized the mending of relationships between humanity and nature, between survival and respect. Sedna is not a goddess of comfort. She is not easily categorized as good or evil. She is wrathful when wronged, nurturing when honored. Her story is about consequences, about the price of betrayal and the sacredness of life. She represents the sea as it truly is, capable of abundance, but also capable of swallowing everything in silence. To worship Sedna is to live in constant awareness of one's actions, of one's relationship to the environment. Every successful hunt, every meal from the sea is a negotiation with her. Her myth has persisted for centuries, passed down in stories, dances, and song. Even as modern Inuit communities face the pressures of climate change, colonial trauma, and environmental degradation, Sedna remains. She appears in contemporary art, in films, and even in activist circles as a symbol of environmental justice. For many, she is not just a myth, but a living force, a reminder that the earth watches, remembers, and responds. Sedna's continued presence in Inuit spirituality speaks to a worldview that sees no separation between people and nature. The Arctic is not a place of exile, but of deep connection. Every gust of wind, every crack of ice is part of a larger story, one in which humans are not masters but guests. The animals are not simply resources, they are gifts from Sedna. The sea is not a void. It is a sacred body inhabited by a consciousness as complex and fierce as our own. In recent decades, as climate change threatens Arctic ecosystems and traditional hunting ways of life, Sedna's myth takes on urgent new meaning. Melting ice, vanishing wildlife, and polluted waters are not just scientific crises, they are spiritual wounds. And in this context, Sedna is not just a character from ancient lore. She is a voice calling out through time, demanding responsibility, care, and remembrance. There is a raw, elemental truth in Sedna's story, a truth that speaks to the fragility of balance. She reminds us that all life comes from relationship. When that relationship is damaged through greed, violence, or ignorance, the very foundations of survival begin to crack. Sedna does not punish arbitrarily, she simply reacts. Her world, like ours, is built on reciprocity. Give and you may receive, harm and you may lose everything. To understand Sedna is to understand that the sea has a soul, that the world we inhabit is alive in ways we cannot fully see, but must always respect. She is not gone. She is watching from below. And as long as her creatures swim and the ice breathes, her story will be told. On the lush islands of Hawaii, where the air smells of salt and flowers and the ground sometimes rumbles underfoot, lives a goddess who breathes fire. Her name is Pele, and she is both creator and destroyer. To those who know her, she is not a distant myth. She is the living, fiery soul of the land itself, the force that formed the islands, that continues to shape them with every eruption, and that reminds all who live there that paradise comes at the mercy of a goddess who walks in fire. Pele's story begins far across the Pacific, in the ancestral homelands of Kahiki. She is said to have come to the Hawaiian Islands aboard a canoe, fleeing conflict with her sister, Namakaukaha'i, goddess of the sea. As the legend tells it, wherever Pele struck her, O'o stick into the ground, a volcano would rise. But her sister, furious and powerful, would send waves to extinguish Pele's flames. The two waged war across the archipelago, with Pele moving from island to island, leaving trails of fire and craters behind her. At last, she found refuge on the big island of Hawaii, where her spirit is said to reside within Halamaumau crater at the summit of Kilauea volcano. Pele is not just a bringer of destruction, she is a goddess of transformation. Her lava consumes forests, buries homes, and carves new landscapes, but it also creates new land, making the islands grow inch by inch. This duality lies at the heart of her power. She is revered not only for her rage, but for her creativity. She burns not out of malice, but out of purpose. Through fire, she gives birth to new beginnings. The people of Hawaii have long understood this balance. For centuries, they have lived with Pele's moods, offering her gifts to gain her favor. Leis of Thai leaves, bottles of gin, and locks of hair are left at her craters, signs of respect for the fire goddess who can give as easily as she takes. Travelers are warned not to take lava rocks from the islands, for doing so is said to offend Pele and bring misfortune. The story is so persistent that thousands of pieces of lava are mailed back to Hawaii each year by remorseful tourists, hoping to end their streak of bad luck. Pele is often described in human form, a beautiful woman with long flowing hair, or an old frail wanderer asking for kindness from strangers. Those who meet her in disguise and treat her with respect are said to be blessed. Those who mock or ignore her may find themselves facing consequences they don't understand until it's too late. These stories passed down through generations are not mere superstitions. They reflect a worldview in which nature is conscious, responsive, and worthy of reverence. Her most dramatic appearances, however, are through volcanic eruptions. When Kilauea erupts, it is said that Pele is dancing. Her lava flows are her footsteps. Her thunder is her voice. Locals speak of her with a mixture of awe and affection. She is Tutu Pele, a grandmother figure, powerful and unpredictable. During eruptions, communities gather to watch the lava, to chant, to pray. They do not see the destruction as random or cruel, but as part of an ancient rhythm that has shaped their lives and land for millennia. Unlike gods who rule from the heavens, Pele is tactile, immediate, visceral. You can feel her heat, smell her smoke, watch her reshape the earth. And in this immediacy lies her enduring power. She is not a myth you grow out of. She is a reality you must live with. Her story reminds Hawaiians that their home is alive, not just biologically but spiritually. The volcano is not an obstacle to be conquered, but a living being to be respected. Modern Hawaiians, including many cultural practitioners and kumu hula teachers, keep her story alive through chants, dances, and rituals. Hula, often misunderstood as entertainment, originated as sacred storytelling, a way to pass down the myths and honor the gods. In these performances, Pele's battles, loves, and journeys are reenacted with profound emotion. Through the sway of hips and the beat of pahu drums, her legend continues to breathe. Even in the face of modernity, Pele's presence has not diminished. Scientists and spiritualists alike recognize the awe she inspires. Geologists track her movements with instruments, while practitioners listen for her messages in dreams and signs. The lava flows may be studied for their temperature and chemistry, but they are also watched with respect. For beneath the science lies a story, and that story has a heartbeat. Pele's myth is more than a tale of a fiery goddess. It is a lesson in humility. In a world that often seeks to dominate and exploit nature, her story reminds us that we are never truly in control. We are, at best, temporary guests on an island of fire, shaped by a force far older than ourselves. To walk on Hawaiian soil is to walk in Pele's footsteps, and to remember that all creation comes with fire. In the lands where mountains breathe smoke and the oceans whisper beneath ice, mythology becomes more than metaphor. It becomes map and memory. For the indigenous peoples of volcanic and Arctic regions, survival has always meant living in dialogue with nature's fiercest forces. To them, the land is not a backdrop or a resource. It is a living, breathing entity filled with presence. Spirits dwell in the cliffs. Deities stir beneath glaciers. And every storm, every quake, every eruption is a conversation, sometimes a warning, sometimes a blessing. The myths born in these environments are not simply stories told for entertainment. They are ancient technologies, ways of encoding wisdom, caution, reverence, and belonging into the cultural bloodstream. For the Inuit and other Arctic peoples, the spiritual landscape is shaped as much by silence as by sound. The tundra is vast and quiet, the sea thick with mystery. The sun can disappear for weeks, the wind can howl for days, and in the in-between spaces, people learned to listen for signs. In these regions, shamanism became a vital bridge between the physical and spiritual realms. Shamans, often chosen through visions or inherited gift, were healers, negotiators, and translators of the unseen. They traveled between worlds through trance, carried by drumbeat and breath, seeking guidance from ancestral spirits or pleading with deities like Sedna to restore balance. The mythologies that formed around these practices weren't static. They evolved with experience, shaped by the land's moods and the community's needs. One such figure in Arctic lore, aside from Sedna, is the spirit of the moon, Aningan. He is often portrayed as a celestial hunter who chases his sister, the sun, across the sky. This myth not only explains the lunar phases, but also speaks to the cycles of hunger and light that define life in the north. A Ningen grows thin during his chase, echoing the way food supplies wane in winter. When he vanishes, so does hope, until he returns again, fattened with promise. These tales aren't just poetic, they carry embedded survival knowledge, rhythms of light and darkness, mirrored in celestial stories that guide daily life. Meanwhile, in volcanic regions such as Indonesia, Iceland, Japan, and the Pacific Islands, the Earth is always moving. The people who live near volcanoes develop an intimate relationship with their terrain, alert, reverent, and deeply embedded in myth. In Java, the spirit of Mount Merapi is considered both protector and destroyer. Offerings are made at its summit to keep it calm. In Iceland, the Old Norse settlers spoke of fire giants and trolls, and believed volcanoes were the gateways to other realms, churning portals to divine anger or transformation. Every culture shaped by volcanic terrain has found mythological language to express the awe and terror of living on top of molten earth. Hawaiian mythology, particularly, provides a robust framework for understanding nature as family. Pele is not the only powerful figure. She is part of a divine lineage that includes gods of rain, fertility, harvest, and sea. Each element of the environment is personified, interrelated, and respected. Rain is not just weather. It is the tears or laughter of gods. Winds have names and intentions. Even stones are not inanimate. They can be sacred, storied, and alive. In this cosmology, everything speaks, and everything deserves to be listened to. The same reverence appears in Arctic animism, where even tools, animals, and weather patterns have spirit. When a hunter takes the life of a seal, it is not done lightly. There are rituals of gratitude, apologies, and balance. Elders teach that disrespecting the animal, wasting its parts, mocking its death, can bring misfortune. These beliefs are more than spiritual codes. They are ethical systems rooted in sustainability. They remind communities that survival is not about domination, but relationship. What's remarkable is how consistently these ideas appear across vastly different environments. Whether shaped by ice or fire, these cultures arrived at a similar truth. Nature is not mute. It speaks through tides and tremors, through eruptions and eclipses. And to live well, to live at all, one must learn to listen. Myths become the grammar of this listening. They give form to the formless, language to the unpredictable. They train the imagination to see what science can't always measure: tension, emotion, soul. Oral storytelling plays a crucial role in transmitting this knowledge. Before written texts, before maps and field guides, there were the elders by the fire, the chants sung to newborns, the dances that mimicked volcanic tremors or the flicker of northern lights. In these performances, memory is embodied. Myth becomes muscle. And through this living archive, communities remember not just facts, but values: humility, gratitude, interdependence. Today, as global environmental crises mount and traditional lands are threatened, these ancient stories take on new urgency. The knowledge embedded in them, the understanding that the earth has limits, that the gods must be honored, that balance is sacred, offers a counter-narrative to the extractive, exploitative logic of modern industry. Indigenous myths of fire and ice are not relics of a primitive past. They are blueprints for a possible future, one in which listening to the land is not a quaint custom, but a survival strategy. In every mountain that breathes, in every sea that speaks, there is a lesson waiting. And through the voices of Sedna, Pele, and countless unnamed spirits, the earth continues to tell its story. It waits not for conquest, but for communion. For someone, anyone, to listen as our ancestors once did. with reverence, with awe, and with the humility to know that we are not above the world, but within it. In today's world of satellites, smartphones, and climate data, it might seem that the gods of ice and fire have been silenced, that Sedna and Pele are little more than stories from a forgotten past, spoken in hushed tones in isolated villages or printed in textbooks under the label of myth. But the truth is far more powerful. These deities have never left. They live on in the rhythms of indigenous life, in the chants of elders, and in the rising voices of a new generation determined to reclaim what was nearly erased. In an age defined by ecological crisis, cultural loss, and a hunger for meaning, the stories of Sedna and Pele are not only relevant, they are essential. Across the Arctic, Inuit communities are facing some of the most extreme impacts of climate change. Melting permafrost, vanishing sea ice, and shifting animal migrations are threatening traditional ways of life. And yet, amidst this upheaval, many are turning back to their spiritual roots. Sedna, once feared and revered beneath the ice, is being remembered not just as a deity but as a guide. Her wrath is no longer seen only as punishment for broken taboos, but also as a warning, a spiritual alarm sounding in response to a world out of balance. For many Inuit youth, reconnecting with Sedna means reconnecting with the land, the language, and a sense of self that colonization tried to sever. Cultural revival movements are taking hold. Inuit artists sculpt Sedna in bone and soapstone. Musicians weave her myth into modern melodies. Activists invoke her name when speaking against offshore drilling and environmental degradation, using her story to remind the world that the sea is not empty, it is sacred. Elders teach that the spirit world is still listening, still watching, and still expecting us to honor our end of the relationship. Through Sedna, they argue, we are being called to remember our responsibilities to the earth. In Hawaii, a parallel resurgence is unfolding. The image of Pele has surged into public consciousness, not only through volcanic eruptions which continue to awe and alarm, but also through political and cultural movements. During the protests at Mauna Kea, where native Hawaiians opposed the construction of a massive telescope on a sacred mountain, Pele's spirit was invoked not as folklore, but as living resistance. The mountain, seen by many as a sibling or extension of Pele, became a battleground for sovereignty, spirituality, and environmental justice. Chants honoring her echoed across the slopes, carried by those who saw themselves not as protesters, but as protectors. At the same time, hula schools, Hawaiian language immersion programs, and cultural festivals are keeping Pele's story alive in ways that feel both ancient and modern. Her name appears in contemporary poetry, performance art, and even in climate science discussions. She is a bridge between tradition and transformation, not a fossil of faith, but a force in flux. And for many Hawaiians, she is a symbol of resilience, a reminder that identity is as rooted in the land as it is in blood. What these revivals reveal is that myth is never truly dead. It evolves. It waits in silence, sometimes for generations, until a people are ready to listen again. And in that listening, something profound occurs. A restoration, not just of culture, but of consciousness. When the Inuit honor Sedna, they are not simply preserving a story, they are reweaving a worldview. When Hawaiians chant to Pele, they are not indulging in nostalgia, they are activating a legacy. In a time when global culture often prioritizes speed over depth, control over connection, these indigenous spiritualities offer an alternative path. They ask us to slow down, to pay attention, to see the sacred in what others call resource. They challenge us to treat land not as property, but as relative. and they remind us that wisdom can be found not only in innovation, but in remembrance. The gods of ice and fire still speak. Their voices echo in lava flows, in icy winds, in the quiet stories of elders who have never forgotten. And as the world stands at a crossroads, ecologically, culturally, spiritually, those echoes grow louder. They call us to humility, to reverence, and to relationship. And for those who are willing to listen, they offer something rare, a way forward that is also a way home. From the frozen edges of the Arctic to the molten hearts of volcanic islands, the myths of Sedna and Pele show us a truth both simple and profound. The earth is alive. It breathes, it remembers, it responds. And for the cultures who live closest to its most extreme expressions, survival has never been about domination. It has always been about relationship with the land, with the elements, and with the spirits that animate them. In Sedna's silence and in Pele's flame, we see not just nature personified, but the raw emotional wisdom of people who never stopped listening to their world. These myths endure because they speak to something we still feel: awe in the face of mountains that move, seas that vanish and return, fire that destroys and gives life. And in an age of rapid change and forgetting, they offer a vital form of memory, not a nostalgic escape, but a compass. They remind us that the stories we tell about the world shape how we live in it. That mythology is not just a relic of the past, but a mirror reflecting our fears, our hopes, and our responsibilities. The gods of ice and fire are not dead. They are the shifting currents beneath melting glaciers. They are the hiss of steam where lava meets ocean. They are the rage in the storms and the grief in the droughts. And they are the voices in us that long to reconnect with something older, wiser, and deeper than ourselves. Whether we speak their names in ritual or read their stories from a screen, they challenge us to see the sacred in the living earth and to act accordingly. So if this journey has sparked something in you, a memory, a question, a flicker of reverence, don't let it go quiet. Let it grow. Let it guide your curiosity deeper. If you felt the fire of Pele or the pull of Sedna in these words, consider this your invitation to explore further. Subscribe to join us in more untold stories from the edges of the world. Like the video if it moved you, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your voice is part of this myth too. The gods are still speaking. The only question is, are we ready to listen?